Hey, I'm Steve from Smart Agile and welcome to the Agile Lean Gardener. So today I'm going to tell you how you can get a Scrum Master role with no experience. And by no experience, I mean that you haven't held an official Scrum Master role at a company before. Now, many years ago, I was a budding Scrum Master in the making, but I'd never held that role officially. So I'm going to tell you exactly what I did to change that. First, you should know that it's very competitive out there. The Scrum Master role is not an entry-level position. You're in a chicken and egg scenario. The good news for you is that there are thousands of open positions for Scrum Masters. And you might be surprised at just how much experience you already have. Okay, so here's my 9-step plan to gain experience and get you that Scrum Master role. I put the time codes in the description below so you can skip to a particular section, but if you're serious about getting a Scrum Master role, I would watch all of it. Okay, first up is the Scrum Guide. Second, certification. Next, social media. Then, the Scrum Simulation at home with Jira. Next, developing your current situation at your workplace if you have one. Then, the not-for-profit scenario. Then, updating your CV or resume. A few interview tips, and finally, a short reading list. Okay, step 1. First thing you should do, if you haven't already, is read the Scrum Guide at scrum.org. Yes, I've read it, I hear you say, but have you? Have you really read it at a deep level, analysed it beyond just the words and found some meaning? So look, my suggestion is to read it multiple times on a daily basis. Make notes, ask yourself questions and seek out the answers. If you can't find the answers, we'll pick up on that in the social media section. Now, although this isn't going to give you direct experience, it's really important as it's one way you can differentiate yourself, because you would be surprised at just how many Scrum Masters only think they know the Scrum Guide. Now, I'll drop a link to the latest 2020 version in the description below. Okay, step 2. Now, I'm not a big fan of certification, but you're new with no experience, so you need at least a basic level. Now, it doesn't need to cost much. You can take an online exam, which is all based on the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide is only 13 pages long, so it's not that difficult. Now, I'd recommend scrum.org's PSM I. It only costs about $150 per attempt, and they have a free online practice test, which you can take as many times as you like before you take the exam, so you'll know when you're ready. Okay, also, scrum.org have just released a free self-assessment tool that helps you evaluate yourself and shows you what areas of learning you should focus on. Now, I'll drop links to all 3 of those in the description below. Now, if you've got a bigger budget, I'd strongly recommend doing an on-site 2-day course for the PSM I, as you'll get a lot more out of it, but it will cost more, around $1,200. Or you could take a virtual course around the $800 mark. Okay, step 3. The next thing you need to do is join the many Scrum and Agile communities or groups on LinkedIn. Now, there are loads of them, like scrum.org, Agile, and Scaled Agile Framework. Those 3 are among the biggest. Now, change your headline, not your position, in LinkedIn to Professional Scrum Master PSM I, and add your certificate to the Licenses and Certifications section. Also, connect on LinkedIn with Scrum Masters, especially if they're PSTs, Professional Scrum Trainers. It's best to do it where you've got common connections, or if you don't have any, then send them a message explaining why you're asking to connect, and you'll find that most people are very accommodating. And this is great for 2 reasons. First is that you'll find the community are very friendly. They're very happy to help. So if you've got any questions about Scrum that you can't find answers to, then simply post your question and you'll get answers pretty quickly. So those questions that you couldn't find answers to when you were reading the Scrum Guide, ask them here. And follow me on LinkedIn. I've got a lot of extra content there that you'll probably be interested in. There's a LinkedIn follow me link in the description below. Now, pay more attention to answers from professional Scrum trainers from scrum.org and certified Scrum trainers from the Scrum Alliance. This is because their answers will be more reliable until you've gained some experience. And the second reason for connecting on LinkedIn is that many Scrum Masters have regular free meetups that you can attend. Most are virtual, and you'll learn a lot by going to them. And don't be shy about asking questions. There are no stupid questions, and people will be happy to help. Now, really put some effort into LinkedIn. It is a great free resource for you. And as always, please support this channel by liking, subscribing and sharing. It really makes a huge difference to a small channel and helps keep the videos coming. Now, you can also support the channel by hitting the thanks button below, just as Rommel Bandera did on my recent video, how to start using flow metrics. Thanks again, Rommel. I really do appreciate it. Right, step 4. Now, we learn by doing. So you're going to run a sprint simulation at home and you're going to use the most popular Agile tool out there, Jira. But don't worry, it won't cost you a penny. you're going to sign up for a free Jira cloud account, and I'll walk you through that. Now, this will allow you to use Jira for your sprint at home, so we'll give you experience of using this tool as well. Now, it's a really good idea to get familiar with Agile tools because it is a fact you'll have to use one as a Scrum Master. Now, there's many different Agile tools out there, but they all basically work in the same way. So once you've got the concept, it's easy to apply to the other tools. And as you know, on a Scrum team, we've got the Scrum Master, the Product Owner, and the developers. Now, you'll obviously act as a Scrum Master in this scenario. Now, if you've got a family at home, it will make this simulation run much easier. I'd suggest your partner acts as the product owner, and if you've got kids, well, they can be the developers. If not, you're going to have to wear a lot of hats and try and put yourself in their shoes when playing their role. Or maybe you can get a couple of willing friends to help you out. First things first, let's get you up and running on Jira. So go to this URL, which is also in the description below. Scroll down and select the Scrum template and then click Try Now. Click Create Account. Type your email address in the box. You'll then need to verify your email address, so go and check for the email that Atlassian has just sent you. Check your junk mail folder as it often ends up in there. Now, when you click Verify, it will take you to a page where you'll type your name and choose a password. Atlassian will then take you to a page where you'll need to type in a name to identify your site. And my suggestion is just to type in your name. And the box will glow red if that name is already taken. If it is, just add some numbers in the box until it turns green and then click Agree. It will then ask you for some more info, but just click Skip a few times and Atlassian will then create your site. And then it will ask you to name your project. But before you do, click on Templates and select Scrum. So we're going to use the Scrum template for our simulation. Right, then enter the name of your project. I just put Test Project and then click Create. Now dismiss the Welcome and Quick Start boxes and the screen will look like this. Now this shows you your backlog. Now click on Epic and enable the Epic panel. You've now got the basic setup of Jira done to enable you to run a sprint simulation at home. So bookmark this page now so you can get back to it easily. Now, as you know, most Scrum teams use epics and stories. Epics are larger pieces of work that contain a number of smaller stories. The stories are what a Scrum team work on during the sprint. During the sprint planning, the team decide on a sprint goal, then decide which stories they're going to work on from the backlog to achieve that, and then move them into the sprint. But we haven't got any epics or stories yet, so we'll need to create some, and we'll also need to create a sprint goal. But first, we need a product vision and a product goal. And this would normally come from the product owner. We need this because we need to know the long-term objective, why it's valuable, that's the product vision, and which things we're going to focus on first, that's the product goal. Now, once we've achieved the product goal, the product owner would create another product goal and so on until the product vision is realized. And for this scenario, our product vision is going to be, I want my family to eat a healthy, balanced diet that keeps them satisfied, but also excited and teaches them how to prepare and make meals, explaining and discovering what good and bad foods are and how many of these bad foods we can safely eat. Our first product goal will be a subset of this and could be how to make breakfast and an evening meal, eating it together as a family, that it's enjoyable with enough treats but still remaining healthy. So, we're going to need some epics for this product goal. And my suggestion is to create categories of food for your epics such as meat, poultry, fish, vegetables, etc. And then create the stories underneath each of those. So let's create the first epic, meat. Right, click Create and change the issue type to epic and type meat in the summary and then click Create. Now we'll create some stories under this epic. The stories will be the types of food under each epic. So for the meat epic, we might have lamb, beef, etc. So expand the epic panel and click on View All Details. On the right-hand side, click on TP1. Your name will probably be different to this. The TP comes from the first two letters of how we named the project. Mine was named Test Project. And the 1 just signifies that this is the first issue that's been created in Jira. It's the unique ID of the issue. An issue is basically anything you create in Jira. So an epic, story, bug, etc. They're all issues. Now, after you've clicked on TP1, you'll see this screen. Now, to create our stories under this epic, click on Add a Child Issue. You'll see a box appear under Child Issues and it will show Story. If it says Task, just click on it and select Story. In the box next to Story, type the name of your story. So for example, type Lamb and then click Create. You'll see that it has created the story and you can now add more stories. So repeat this process until you've added all of the meat types you want under your epic meat. And when you've finished, click Backlog. Repeat this process until you've added all of the epics you need, which are the food categories, and also added all of the stories under those epics, which are the types of food under that category. Once done, return to your backlog. You'll see all of the epics you've created in the epic panel. When none of them are highlighted, you will see all of the stories created under your backlog. If you highlight an epic, it will only show you those stories that belong to that epic. And we aren't going to move anything into sprint yet, as we've still got a few things to discuss first. But let's take a quick look at the board we'll use when we start the sprint, just to familiarise ourselves. So click on board. You can see 3 columns: to do, in progress and done. That's all we're going to need for this simulation. And the board is where you will see the stories that you select for the sprint. You don't move epics into the sprint, only the stories. To move them from column to column, you simply drag and drop. What you'll do when you start the sprint is to move the stories you're going to need for the meal to in progress, and after the meal, move them to the done column. Now, sprints vary in size up to 1 calendar month. The most common is 2-week sprints, but we're going to do a 1-week sprint because it suits our scenario, since we're going to do our weekly shopping, probably on a Saturday or a Sunday for the upcoming week. So now you're going to have to explain Scrum to your team, provide the product vision and product goal to your product owner, and let them explain that. Now, this is excellent experience in itself, as you'll have to do this as a real-life Scrum Master. Now, this sprint simulation isn't going to be perfect, and that's good, because believe me, most sprints are far from perfect. So again, it's good experience in itself. Now, you may have heard of refinement sessions in Scrum. Although they're not an official event within Scrum, they are essential so that the team understands what the stories are, discover any dependencies, and make sure that the team believes the story is something achievable within the sprint. They also make sprint planning much easier. Now, you're going to hold a refinement session with the team before you start your sprint. You'll run through the epics and the stories with them explaining their purpose. Now, in our scenario, it's not so much we understand the epics and stories, it's more about getting a consensus on foods we like, would eat or wouldn't eat, and is there anything missing? And the product owner needs to communicate why the foods are needed. And this stimulates conversation in a similar way to a refinement session in a real sprint in the workplace. Now, there's one last thing you need to do before you start your sprint, and that's to decide what your definition of done is going to be. Now, for stories to be done, they must meet this. Now, it's usually a list of things, including things like unit test successful, code peer reviewed, acceptance criteria met, the documentation needed has been created, etc. But for you, it's just going to be meals happened successfully and all ingredients, the stories you created, were available. So, after each meal, you can only move the stories needed for that meal to the done column on your board if you've met the definition of done. If not, then you'll have to leave them in the in progress column, and you can discuss the issues around it at your retrospective, which I'll talk about shortly. Once you've done this, decide when your sprint will start. My advice is to start it on the day you go shopping. Let's say that's a Saturday. So, first thing on the Saturday morning, you're going to run a sprint planning event. Now here, you're going to decide your sprint goal and choose what food you'll need to buy for the week ahead with the team. So the sprint goal is a small subset of the product goal that is achievable in our 1-week sprint. So let's remember what our product goal was. How to make breakfast and an evening meal, eating it together as a family, and that it's enjoyable with enough treats but still remaining healthy. So my suggestion is only to focus on eating an evening meal together and that it's healthy but with some treats. So we'll drop the how to make it part and breakfast because that's too much to do in our 1-week sprint. So our sprint goal is eating a healthy family evening meal together with some treats. So now we return to the backlog in Jira and enter the start and end date for our sprint and also put the sprint goal in. So click the 3 dots on the right hand side of sprint 1 and click edit. And fill out the boxes and click update. So now you will sit down together at your sprint planning event and plan your next 7 days of evening meals and pick the food stories you need from the backlog and drag them into your sprint. And when you've done that, click start sprint and it will take you to your board where you'll see all the stories you just added to the sprint in the to-do column. And once you're done, off you go to the market to buy the things you need. Your sprint has started. In this exercise, I'd strongly encourage you to only buy the things you agreed on in sprint planning. The reason for this will almost certainly become evident as you go through your sprint, and I'll come back to this point in a moment. Each morning, you're going to hold a daily scrum with the team. It's going to be short, a maximum of 15 minutes. Here, you're going to discuss your sprint goal and how close you are to achieving it. Was everyone happy with yesterday's evening meal? Was there anything missing? Did you forget some ingredients, herbs or condiments? If so, create the stories for these and place them in the appropriate epic. or if there isn't one, create it. Then add them to the sprint if they're going to be needed for any of the remaining meals. Jira will give you a warning if you try to do this, but ignore that and do it anyway. You'll then see them in the to-do column on your board. Now, remember I said only buy what you'd agreed to at your sprint planning? Well, this is why, and it happens all the time in Scrum. This is fine. The objective of the sprint is the sprint goal and not all the individual stories that you take in. So, this is what you'll do for the next 6 days. Inspect and adapt together. But don't wait to do this at the daily Scrum. If a problem crops up, speak to the Scrum Master straight away. Each day, you'll move your stories for the evening meal you're having that day to the in progress column, and then move them to done after the meal. As long as it was a successful meal, remember your definition of done. Otherwise, leave them in progress and pick up on that on the final day at the sprint retrospective. Now on the 7th day, you're going to have 2 meetings with the team, the sprint review and the sprint retrospective. At the sprint review, go through each evening meal you had and talk about the plus points and any downsides. Discuss if the sprint goal was achieved and did anyone have any recommendations on what would have made it better. At the sprint retrospective, which is the final meeting of the sprint and officially closes the sprint, have a chat about the way you work together. Sprint planning. Is there anything that could have been done better? The actions that you should make a note of so that next time it would be a better sprint. Was everyone comfortable with the process? Finally, on your board, you can close the sprint by clicking Complete Sprint. And hopefully you'll have completed all your stories, but don't worry if you haven't, because that's often what happens in real work sprints. You can now go to your backlog and repeat the whole process again for Sprint 2. Practice makes perfect. Okay, step 5. Okay, so this step is only applicable if you're currently employed. If you're not, then skip this and move to step 6. So, if you're currently employed, there are a few options for you. The first is if your company currently uses Scrum. So speak to your manager and try and convince them to allow you to shadow current Scrum Masters. I cite the fact that you've paid for your own training to get certified as a Scrum Master, and that shows some initiative, ambition, and that you're really serious. Now, you may have to work longer hours in order to do this, so be prepared. This is a great option to gain experience if it's available to you. The second is if you believe your current environment could work well within the Scrum framework. So prepare a proposal to your manager to allow a trial of Scrum. And thirdly, if none of the first 2 options are viable, then simply apply Scrum theory to your current situation. So try and organise short catch-ups with your team each morning, aka Daily Scrum. Try and implement regular reviews of work done, aka Sprint Review. And also implement regular work reflections, aka Sprint Retrospective. So in short, try and implement the Scrum framework into your daily work life as much as possible. But I'd recommend against using words like Scrum or Agile in this scenario, and try not to use terminology from the Scrum Guide. Now, if this works and people have found it useful, return to the second option and explain to your manager what this experiment was about, its results and its benefits, and once again, try to convince your manager to allow a trial of Scrum. Step 6. The next option for you is to contact any charities or not-for-profit organisations and offer your services for free. And this is a great way to get experience as a Scrum Master, and you'll be legitimately able to use this on your CV. Plus, it always looks good to have these kind of roles on your CV. It shows your human, caring side. But this option isn't going to be for everyone. If you're currently in work, you may not have the time to spare to do 2 roles. But with charities and not-for-profit, they'll have flexible working hours, and because you're doing it for free, they may well be able to accommodate you. It could be challenging, but look, you need to gain some experience one way or another, and all of these options are going to require you to work longer hours. Okay, step 7. Right, now that you've gained some experience from one or more of the options I've just discussed, you need to update your CV. And the first thing to know is that most employment agencies run all of the CVs they receive for a role through a computer which scans for keywords related to that role. So make sure that your CV contains keywords from the Scrum Guide, such as Scrum Master, Product Owner, Scrum, Sprint, etc. Go through the Scrum Guide and highlight all of the keywords and phrases and integrate them into your CV. Also be sure to mention that you've got Jira experience, which you have from your Sprint Simulation. Now be sure not to exaggerate or worse still lie, but think back to the experience you've gained and think how you can reword your current CV so that it shows that even though you haven't actually held an official Scrum Master position, that you have in fact been acting as one. Now take your time over this. Once done, get some friends to read it. Tell them that you're going to apply for a Scrum Master role, which you might need to explain to them, and ask them for thoughts and feedback. Now another alternative is to hire a professional resume writer who can work with you to craft your CV. And once you're happy, start applying for Scrum Master roles, but stick to the lower paid roles because the competition will be less and you'll have a better chance of an interview. But if you're able to land a role, you only need to do it for a year, and then you can start applying for better paid roles. Step 8. Now, when you get an interview, make sure that you reread the Scrum Guide multiple times. You don't want to get caught out on silly questions that you should have known. But the most important piece of advice is not to talk about theory. What the interviewer really wants to hear is how you've handled real-life situations with practical examples. So make sure you've thought about this and got a nice long list ready. Right, the other thing worth doing is typing into Google Scrum Master interview questions and answers. There are many sites like this. Run through them to get familiar with them. And get your partner or friend to ask you random questions from the Scrum Guide. And any answer you provide, you need to come up with how you've done this in a practical way. All right, step 9. Okay, finally, I've got a short reading list. Bearing in mind you're a new Scrum Master, I don't want to overload you, but all of these books are well worth reading and they'll help you expand your knowledge. First up, Drive by Dan Pink. This book focuses on 3 elements of motivation, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and has smart and surprising techniques for putting all of these things into action. Next, User Stories Applied by Mike Cohn. Now, this one provides you with a front-to-back blueprint for writing user stories and weaving them into your development lifecycle. You'll learn what makes a great user story and what makes a bad one. Next, Sooner, Safer, Happier by Jonathan Smart. This book reveals the patterns and anti-patterns that will help organizations from every industry deliver better value, sooner, safer, and happier through high levels of engagement, inclusion, and empowerment. Next, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. This book reveals, as the title suggests, the 5 dysfunctions of a team, which goes to the very heart of why teams, even the best ones, struggle and provide actionable steps that can be used to overcome this. Next, Scrum Mastery by Jeff Watts. This book talks about the skills and characteristics of great Scrum Masters, how to generate, increase and maintain engagement from the team and increase performance among many other things. Next, The People's Scrum by Tobias Meyer. This book's a collection of essays drawn from his writings over the past years on the blogs Agile Thinking and Agile Anarchy. It's missives from the front lines of Agile practice that represent the next generation of thinking on conventional Agile topics. And finally, When Will It Be Done by Daniel S. Picanti. I've included this one as it's probably my favourite book, but be warned, you'll need to read this one many times, but it's worth it. It's basically the definitive guide on lean agile forecasting. It gives you all the tools you need in order to answer your customer's most important question, when will it be done? Okay, look, I wish you all the best of luck landing your first Scrum Master role, and please reach out and ask me any questions you like in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to help. Okay, that's it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Stay humble, and I will see you next time.